Do you know, Mark, when I used to come up here with Girl Scouts, I never realized how much history was up here.
The Rock is just full of history, Pam. Many important events took place here during the Revolutionary War. Don't you know the history about George Washington?
Washington used the Rock as a lookout. It says here on the monument, General George Washington watched the movements of the British forces during the anxious months of May and June 1777. This area was also a strategic location for another reason. Below there was a fort on the property of colonial residents Cornelius and Frederick Vermeulen. The fort repulsed many attacks during the war.
The Rock didn't become a park right after the war, though. The land changed hands many times. At one time, there was a hotel up here. Many vacationers would drive up to spend time at the resort. Unfortunately, in the late 1800s, the hotel burned down. After the fire, Mr. Charles McCutcheon bought the land and donated it to create a park on top of Washington Rock. A commission was then formed and they established the Washington Rock Park. To commemorate the site, the Continental chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution erected a monument which stands here today.
That sure is a lot of history for one place. I heard an interesting story about how Washington Rock had a part in the origin of Dunellen. It claims that Washington wanted to have a secret meeting while staying in the area. Washington and his advisors chose to have the meeting at an inn run by a woman named Ellen Dunn. Since the meeting was to be secret, Washington and his advisors decided to make a code. They switched around Ellen Dunn's name to Dunellen. This is how Dunellen supposedly got its name, but actually there is no record of any Ellen Dunn.
From Washington Rock, one could have watched the town of Dunnellen grow over its past 100 years. In this centennial year, it is the purpose of this documentary to present the history of Dunnellen's past 100 years. To better understand that history, it is necessary to go down to the town where that history took place. Our first stop is the railroad station. In 1868, the Jersey Central Railroad wanted to develop the land along the railroad to provide a commuter path to New York. Dunnellen up to this time had only been a small railroad stop for the entire New Market area. At this time, John Taylor Johnston was head of the Jersey Central Railroad and was a prominent New York financier. He directly sponsored the project and became, in fact, the founder of Dunnellen.
The railroad began to form Dunnellen by buying land on the north side of the railroad track. After the railroad accomplished this task, it laid out a small village, what is now the town of Dunnellen. The first land in Dunnellen was bought by John Runyon on the corner of Washington Avenue and Front Street for $500. Another early purchaser was David S. Runyon, who bought 10 lots for about $1,300.
History usually deals with the past, but each day history is made by those people living in the town of Dunnellen. One person most intimately involved with the history of the town is local historian Wes Ott.
Well, the railroad ran to Bound Brook and then on to Somerville, and there it joined up with another railroad. That's where John Taylor Johnston came in. He was about 28 years old, but when these railroads merged, he became president of both of them. All this railroad ran through with farmland, and he decided to make it a community to make commuters for his railroad. So he established Fanwood, Evona, which is Grand Avenue now, Clinton Avenue, and he bought all the land on the north side of the track for Dunnellen, named it Dunnellen.
The origin of the name Dunnellen is widely disputed. Most versions stem from stories of how John Taylor Johnston named Dunnellen.
The official version of the name Dunnellen comes from Johnston's daughter, Emily DeForest, who claims that her father named the town after his intimate friend Ellen Betts. He took her first name and added the prefix Dunn because he thought it was a pleasant-sounding name. Over the years, Dunnellen has grown with the railroad's help. The railroad from the beginning planned on Dunnellen's growth. It laid out spaces for parks, churches, and schools. In today's rush for land, Dunnellen does not face the problems of urban growth. Dunnellen is a model planned community. The governing body of Dunnellen has remained relatively stable over the past 100 years. The governing body consists of a mayor and 6 elected councilmen. The body provides services for the town through taxes such as education, police protection, and local sanitation.
The government is housed in the Borough Hall on the corner of Prospect Avenue and North Avenue. In 1896, the town bought the land which is still the present site of the Borough Hall. The first Borough Hall, a 2-story building which cost $1,650, contained 2 jail cells, a courtroom, the police headquarters, and a meeting chamber for the council.
In 1937, the present Borough Hall was built. The police department, tax assessor's office, a courtroom, jail cells, and the recreation department are contained in this building.
During the town's 100 years, there have been 22 mayors. Each has contributed something unique to Dunellen. The mayor this year is Larry Anzavino, who has been mayor for the past 22 years. Mayor Anzavino is the driving force behind this year's centennial theme, Volunteer Town, USA.
Well, Dunnellen is the type of town that has an abundance of volunteers. And small towns throughout the state of New Jersey and throughout the country actually cannot survive without volunteers. If we had to pay the fire company, I'm sure if we had it around the clock, it would be almost impossible for a small town like Dunnellen to survive. Rescue squad, same way. So actually, we're very fortunate that we have the type of people in this community that are willing to sacrifice many years of their lives, and each day there's so many people that do get involved. So it's a benefit to us. As far as the fire company is concerned, we have one of the best. I know when I started with the fire company, I was always impressed with the professionalism of the Dunnellen Fire Department. It hasn't changed.
Although Dunellen is a small town, religion plays an important role in its life. In this 1 square mile town, there are 7 churches. Dunellen Methodist Church, St. John's Roman Catholic Church, St. Nicholas Catholic Church, St. Luke's Lutheran Church, St. Francis Episcopal Church, Resurrection of Christ Polish National Church, Dunellen First Presbyterian Church. Henry Heaves has served as pastor for over 25 years at the First Presbyterian Church in Dunellen. He is deeply involved with the religious community and tells us a little bit about it.
This community is a very active community church-wise. We have 7 different denominations in this square mile, and yet there are a lot of unchurched people. Years ago, Roman Catholic Christians and Protestant Christians seldom fellowshiped together. The priest and the pastor seldom even spoke. They might nod in respect, but have no fellowship. And even since I've been here, that has changed in a very positive way.
Dunellen has gone through a revolving business cycle over the last 100 years. Dunellen's first proprietor was Charles Pope. He took advantage of the railroad by locating his general store there. When the railroad began to develop Dunellen in 1868, Pope moved his store to North Avenue. After Pope left the building, it was bought by John Armory and was turned into the Taylor Hotel in 1882.
In 1871, 3 new buildings were constructed on North Avenue. The buildings were rented out to create a grocery store, feed store, and a hardware store. Also, Dr. Brakely, Dunnellen's first doctor, rented space to create Dunnellen's first drugstore. At this time, there were 3 hotels in Dunnellen. Dunnellen had a reputation as a health resort. Factories and pollution were non-existent because the Central Jersey Land Improvement Company had made Dunnellen an exclusive residential area. The clean, healthful air made Dunnellen a perfect vacation spot. One could have stayed at Myers Hotel, Taylor's Hotel, or Mike V. Kerwin's Dunnellen Hotel, which still stands today.
Dunellen continued to prosper. Development took place mostly along North Avenue. By the turn of the century, Dunellen had approximately 41 businesses. At this time, Dunellen was turning away from retail business to the manufacturing industries. The first heavy industry to come to Dunellen was the Levering and Garrig's Iron Works in 1902, which became known as the Levgar Works. Next came R. Hoe and Company after the First World War, which employed 500 people.
Other important industries also came to Dunellen, but in 1925, the arrival of Art Color Printing Company dramatically changed the town. The plant turned out almost 10 million copies of magazines a month. 1,600 Dunellen residents were employed there. Wes
Medical
Ott,
work,
a
too.
former employee of Art Color,
World
talks
Almanac,
about the company's
things like that.
impact on Dunellen.
So a lot of people in Dunnellen, I don't think, realized that the art color was the biggest concern on the East Coast while it was here. And then in 1932, they merged with W.F. Hall in Chicago. And between the two of them, they were the largest printing concern in the world.
Unfortunately, Art Color closed in 1968. Other large industries have also sought to leave the confines of Dunellen in recent years.
Today, Dunnellen has come full circle in the business cycle. The large industry has turned away from Dunellen. Instead, small shops once again line North Avenue and provide Dunellen with a smaller yet still solid economic base. Dunellen is filled with shops, businesses, and restaurants. Dunellen Movie Theater, 8 on the Break Family Pool Hall, and numerous bars provide entertainment. There are several convenience stores. Blue Cars and Town Shop provide fashion for the town.
One notable restaurant in town is Chan's Garden. Chan's provides excellent Chinese cuisine and has been reviewed as one of the best in the tri-state area. Another popular place is Rome Pizzeria. Mr. John Confalone has run this successful business for the past 20 years. His restaurant has become a favorite spot for the youth of Dunellen, who are spotlighted in our next section.
Dunellen has had a long history of striving for academic excellence. Before Dunellen developed its government, it had a school. In 1800, the first schoolhouse was built in Dunellen. It was a one-story log cabin situated on the present site of Whittier School. The building formed the basis for Dunnellen's school system. Shortly before Dunnellen became a town, the borough decided it needed a new school. In 1874, the grant was applied for, and in 1875, a contractor was hired to build Whittier School at a cost of $10,000. When Whittier School was built, it became an important spot. The building served as a meeting place and a recreation center as well as a school.
In 1888, due to rapid enrollment, the town realized the need for another school on the north side of the tracks. The school on the corner of Lincoln and Dunnellen Avenues was called Lincoln School. In 1927, the Board of Education bought lots on First Street and Lincoln Avenue and proposed to build Roosevelt School, a building which would serve as a high school. Construction was interrupted by the Great Depression. The school was finished in 1935 with the help of a public works grant. 2 years later, in 1937, the first class graduated from the new high school.
A new addition was built on the high school in 1960. It included an auditorium, a cafeteria, a library, and 3 new classrooms. Also, during that year, John P. Faber School was erected on High Street. The school was named after John P. Faber, who served for over 40 years on the Board of Education. Dunnellen schools have been a strong foundation for our children's educational growth. 2 residents and former students involved with the teaching profession, Mr. and Mrs. John Corby, tell us how Dunnellen offers quality education and why they returned here to raise their children.
One of the reasons that we decided to do that was since we both were from Dunnellen. I originally coming from Greenbrook and Mrs. Corby coming from Dunnellen. Both of us liked the idea of the small hometown type of atmosphere. And I think that's one of the reasons we chose Dunnellen to raise our children in.
What do you think about the education in Dunnellen?
I think it's good, personally. For a small town, I think it has a lot to offer. There's a personal touch in school that you don't find. I taught in Piscataway, a much larger district, and you don't find that in Piscataway. I didn't see the caring that goes into taking care of our kids here. I like it. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to stay in Dunnellen.
Since the first class in 1937, Dunnellen has graduated many fine citizens. Dunellen has turned out lawyers, doctors, teachers, and other hardworking professionals. This hardworking attitude develops in the school. One student who has this hardworking attitude is Kathy North, who takes an active part in both school and community activities. She comments on the advantages of a small community school.
Being able to have a one-to-one relationship with the teachers, if you have any questions, they know you well enough and your families that you can do anything. And being able to get involved in school sports, it's not as much competition to get on the teams. Everybody's able to play and you play as a team. There's usually no individuals.
During the year, there are many activities students participate in. The school offers a comprehensive sports program. Dunnellen has also proven very competitive. In 1943, 46, and 59, Dunnellen won the Group 1 state championship in basketball, and more recently, in 1983, won the Group 1 Central Jersey Championship in baseball.
Performing arts have played an important part in DHS. The band, now under the direction of Brian Utero, has turned out many fine musicians. Most recently, Mandy Nagy has been selected as a finalist to the Distinguished Governor's School of the Arts at Trenton State College. The band is divided into several different bands, including marching band, jazz band, wind ensemble, and concert band. The marching band plays at football games, while the other bands have an annual spring concert. The high school choir, under the direction of James Hurd, has become one of the most renowned in the Middlesex County area. Mr. Hurd has won many awards for his outstanding teaching and directing abilities. The choir has prospered under his direction and has been invited to places such as Atlantic City and New York City.
An important event at the end of the year at Dunnellen High School is the annual Arts Festival. It is the combined works of 4 departments: the vocal music department run by James Hurd, the art department run by Deborah Henry, the industrial arts department run by John Shimko, and the home economics department run by Murray Blakely. Each combines their best work for one of the most outstanding displays in the area. Another annual event held since 1937 is the high school play. The 1987 production was the musical Grease, directed by Kelly Gomez. It was the most well-attended and financially successful school play in recent years.
Activities are important during high school life, but more important is the education the student receives. Dr. Gerald Stefanski has had a long professional relationship with Dunnellen schools and the community. He began his career in the high school as assistant principal in 1969. 2 years later, he became principal, and in 1974 began to serve in his present position as superintendent of schools. Dr. Stefanski tells us what the future holds for Dunnellen schools.
During the past 100 years, as those needs have changed, so have our schools. Presently, we are investigating with a neighboring school district a study on the regionalization issue. Now that we are faced with continuing enrollment decline, it is important that the people of Dunnellen consider other options available to them that will be in the best interest of the people's needs and the youth of Dunnellen.
Catherine Klein's comments on student education.
I'd be delighted. At Dunnellen, we have 3 schools. We have Whittier, K through 3, and we have Faber, 4, 5, and 6, and then we have the high school, which is 7 through 12. We have a very good educational system. We educate very well, I believe, both the gifted and talented and also the less talented.
In addition to the school system, Dunnellen's free public library enriches the students' education. Completed in 1974, the library is one of Dunnellen's most ambitious volunteer projects, with the money raised through private donations. Arnold A. Schwartz, president of Art Color, was the principal benefactor. To recognize his contribution, the library was dedicated to him. Finally, after 12 full years of education, students graduate in June. Dunnellen has a unique ceremony in Washington Park, which is our last stop in our tour of Dunnellen.
Washington Park. It is one of the most green and beautiful places in the area. For the past 100 years, Washington Park has remained the same. When the Central Jersey Land Improvement Company was developing Dunnellen, it specifically laid aside the land for the park.
The park remains a special spot in Dunnellen. For many years, Dunnellen has graduated its senior class from Washington Park. The beautiful evening ceremony is unique and fitting as it sends its young children out into the world. Each child will keep this special memory of Dunnellen in his heart for the rest of his life.
Washington Park, 100 years from now, will be the same as it was 100 years ago. This wooded area is our link to the remote beginnings of our small town. Dunnellen, happy 100th anniversary. A toast to you. May you live long and prosper in your second century.